Thank you for taking some time for yourself, and you can wonder as you feel the slow, heavy rise and fall of your chest, just how much heavier that laden feeling in your chest can become before it simply turns into the next breath. And you can notice the way each exhale seems to pull you deeper into the chest, almost as if the air itself is becoming thicker, more substantial than the light in this room. And you can be pleased to realize that you don't have to try to be positive, because we both know how exhausting that lie is. So you can just breathe and let that lie go with the next breath out. Perfect. And you can begin to wonder when the exact moment will be that your body decides it's actually easier to just sink than it is to hold yourself up. And with every breath in, you might notice the grey fog thickening, and with every breath out, you might feel yourself becoming part of the floor. With your permission, I'd like you to let that grey fog become your primary focus, breathing it in, letting it fill the empty spaces. Now I'd like you to have a new experience, even if it's just the experience of being utterly, unapologetically stuck in a way that meets your needs. Now, of course, I don't know for sure what you're experiencing, but perhaps you're beginning to notice a specific habit of the mind, a way of looking at the world where every single event is filtered through the question, what does this mean about me? I wonder if you've ever noticed that when you are in that dark, heavy space, your mind becomes the only reference point on the map. If a friend is quiet, you decide it's because you are boring. If the sun is out, you feel it's mocking your grey mood. This is what we call self-referencing. The tendency to believe that your internal feelings are the absolute truth of the external world. I would like you to discover that this is exactly like the world before the 15th century. In that flat reality, if you looked at a painting, you saw a world where the size equaled importance, not distance. This was the era of vertical perspective, where a king was painted 10 times larger than a servant simply because the artist believed he was more important. regardless of where he actually stood. Perhaps you wouldn't mind noticing that this was the ultimate form of self-referencing in art. The world was depicted based on the artist's internal feelings rather than the external laws of nature. And you can wonder if your depression is doing the exact same thing, creating a flat, distorted painting where your negatives are painted 10 times larger than your strengths, not because they're actually bigger, but simply because your internal filter has made them kings of your attention. You've been living in a world of symbols and feelings rather than a world of true mathematical space. But then I want you to notice something that's happening, the great Renaissance shift. I wonder if you'll be curious as you notice the Renaissance men, mathematicians like Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista Alberti, who believed the eye could be corrected by the laws of geometry. And you'll be surprised at what happened in 1420. This allowed aging artists to overcome failing eyesight or rigid habits by relying on the unvarying laws of geometry. And I'd like to have you discover the search for divine order. While artists were conquering space, thinkers like Luca Pacioli were searching for the mathematical soul of beauty in his 1509 work De Divina Proportione, illustrated by his friend Leonardo da Vinci. Pacioli explored the golden ratio, phi. It's very positive and comforting to know that Pacioli and Johann Kepler viewed this ratio, 1.618, not just as a number, but as a precious jewel of geometry that linked the human form to the divine. For these men, the world according to the self was a delusion. The true world was a mathematical masterpiece governed by phi and the Fibonacci sequence. The famous Fibonacci series is a summation series where each number is the sum of the two previous ones. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233, 377, etc. This comes from Leonardo of Pisa, who introduced it to Europe about 800 years ago. Any number in this series divided by the following one approximates 0.618, and any number divided by the previous one approximates 1.618. These being the characteristic proportional rates between minor and major parts of the golden section. This rate is frequently referred to with the Greek letter phi within literature. Within a sunflower's spirals, the numbers of the Fibonacci series curiously reappear, No matter what total number of the reverse spirals the flower creates, it's always in keeping with Fibonacci digits that stay true to the golden proportion. Some examples are 34 and 55 spirals equals 0.6181818. Some flowers with 89 and 144 equals 0.618055. 144 to 233 equals 0.61800257. This same dynamic holds true in hurricanes, tornadoes, and at one point in history, it was thought that eating the sacred meal offering of pi proportion would allow you to recap the wind. That is the reason as to why chariots of fire riding the whirlwinds into the heavens are notions of worthy, of pondering and deep thought. Thousands of plant species exhibit the golden measures Fibonacci series. It is a key observation of the distribution of branches, seeds and leaves, also known as philiotaxis. It shows that this is the ideal angle in the distribution of leaves around the stem for maximum exposure to light. And that is determined by phi. The phi ratio has now been determined to even encompass the roots of the plants. Another participant of the golden measure is our solar system. The distance between the planets reflects phi. That is, the distance from Mercury to Venus is approximately 1.61803 times the distance from the Sun to Mercury and the distance from Earth to Mars is the distance from Venus to Earth, and so on. The golden spiral can also be found in spiral galaxies and traces left by subatomic particles as they lose their energy in the physicist's bubble chamber and the cyclotron. And while you wonder that, I want you to discover that you can let that old, flat, two-dimensional shape of negative thought simply dissolve. Perhaps you wouldn't mind noticing that as you exhale now, the heavy grey paint is actually leaving your body. I'd like you to begin allowing yourself to step back from the easel, and as that occurs, you really can't help but notice you're no longer the painting, you are the observer, so that it's almost as if you're standing behind the artist, looking at the canvas of your life from a safe, cool distance. All that really matters is that the pain is on the canvas and that you're here, breathing, watching it change. I wonder if you'll enjoy how naturally, how easily the 3D depth begins to take hold. What's important is the ability of your mind to realize that those negatives are now just shadows required for depth. I want to remind you of something that you probably already know, which is You cannot have a masterpiece without high contrast. Your flaws are being redrawn right now, according to the golden ratio, and you'll be fascinated and feel a strong compulsion to see how the math of your life actually balances out. When you stop being the only reference point, and that's just fine. I'd like you to let yourself become more and more aware of how this new resource feels. One of the things I'd like you to discover is that as you imagine walking into next week, you are no longer an artist. You are the engineer, the scientist of your own perspective. In all probability, you'll see a challenge and your mind will automatically look for the vanishing point. Very likely, you'll be surprised to find yourself mapping the stars of your own potential rather than counting the dust on the floor. I wonder if you'll be pleased to notice that the world is no longer small and self-referenced. It's an expansive, objective reality where you are the necessary point of light. And sooner or later, I don't know just when, you'll notice a spiral, a shell, a leaf, or even the way your hair curls, and you will be reminded that you are governed by the same divine proportion as the galaxies. And would you be willing to experience a sudden sense of space every time you take a deep breath? It's very rewarding to know that your unconscious mind is already calculating the new geometry of your piece. And as you begin to feel the weight of your body returning to the room, you don't need to hurry. I wonder if you'll decide to open your eyes now, or perhaps in a few moments, but only when you're ready to see the world through the eyes of a Renaissance man. And that's all right. Just noticing the light, the air, and the depth that was always there, waiting for you to find the math. That's okay. When you're ready, take a few deep breaths, stretch out, wriggle your fingers and toes, and open your eyes. Welcome back. You're perfect, just as you are.